Alrighty, you're all set.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to Life's Community Conversation on Voting, and also welcome Ms. Rebecca Rolfes from the League of Women Voters of Coastal Georgia. Rebecca, thank you for being here, and take it away.
Well, thank you. I sort of virtually met several of you in our previous conversation. So I'm going to go through parts of this fairly quickly because you've seen it before. But I do think it's important, especially with so much misinformation out there, to know who it is who's talking to you. So just a little bit of background about the League. We are 100 years old. If any of you saw all of the coverage, wonderful press coverage that we got last weekend, we had a parade to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment and of the founding of the League of Women Voters. When we were founded and throughout our history, our focus is on voter registration and voter education, and we work to make sure that everyone who has the right to vote can exercise that right. Our tagline is empowering voters and defending democracy. We have about 400,000 members in 100,000 state and local leagues. We are a chapter of that organization. In a typical election cycle, we will reach about over 10 million voters. We are unique in that we are completely nonpartisan. The only other organization that shares this distinction with us is the ACLU. We do not back any party. We never endorse a candidate. Our sole focus is we want you to vote. We don't care who you vote for. Obviously, we do care who you vote for, but we care about the right to vote more than we care about any given candidate or side of any argument. Among our activities are voter registration and education. We partner with other organizations like the ACLU, Common Cause, the NAACP, and so forth to do programming and education. We advocate, we do lobby, both here in Georgia and in DC, for common sense voting reforms, and we do a lot of things about getting out the vote, and I'm going to go into that a little more in depth here today. No state has done more than Georgia in recent years to make voting difficult, especially for minorities, according to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. One of the things I know you're part of your community conversation topics are about intersectionality. And this, of course, doubly affects people with disabilities if they are also a member of a minority. The chances that their voting rights might be compromised, their vote might be suppressed, are increased because of that. We do voter registration drives. This is one we did last year at Georgia Southern. In 2018, the League registered more than 200,000 first-time voters. Rising 18-year-olds are one of the most committed target audiences for voting and voter education. We also attend all naturalization ceremonies around the country and register new citizens, which is great fun. There we go. The National Voter Registration Act of 1993 addressed the historically low registration rates of persons with disabilities. Some of this you're going to know, but I want to be sure and emphasize it so that you do hear it here and you know it. All offices that provide public assistance or state-funded programs that primarily serve persons with disabilities must provide the opportunity to register to vote in federal elections. In other words, you would not have to go to Eisenhower Drive, for instance, in order to register to vote, but you can do that more conveniently at the sort of offices that are already providing assistance.
Rebecca, are you sharing your PowerPoint?
Can't you see it?
I can't. Mm-mm.
And anybody else?
Nope, it doesn't look like it.
Hang on a minute.
Okay.
Share screen. Let's go back here.
Perfect.
There we go.
Now we can.
Sorry. I always forget that part. So this is what I was saying about the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. If you want to check your voter registration status, find out if you are registered, you can also do a lot of other things at this website, mvp.sos.ga.gov. If you have any trouble finding it, that stands for My Voter Page. It is the Secretary of State's page that shows the status. For instance, if you vote absentee, this will show whether they received your absentee ballot. All sorts of things are possible at mvp.sos. So it's a very handy place to do a lot of things. Another important activity of the leagues is voter education. We do a lot of candidate forums. This is a chance for voters to actually ask questions of the candidates themselves, not the people from the press, but the actual voters. We will do 3 of them this year. These are all will be made available on Zoom, so no barrier to attendance, and will allow people to submit questions in advance. We're doing 2 in Chatham County, 1 for the Chatham County Commission Chair, 1 for District Attorney. We're doing 1 for Bryan County Sheriff, and the other is a partnership with Georgia State, where we're having a forum between John Ossoff and David Perdue. We decided not to try to do a candidate forum on the so-called jungle election, which is the special election to fill the Senate seat of Johnny Isakson. There are 21 candidates, so there really wasn't a way to do that. Another valuable resource for voters is the League's vote411.org. As you see here, you can register, you can check your voter registration, but more importantly, you can see exactly who is on your ballot, which will allow you to make some decisions before you go to the polls. You put in your address, you choose your language, you pick your party if you want, and it will show you who you're going to be able to vote for. This is an example of the League's grassroots activity. Each local league is responsible for filling this out with their candidates locally, and then the state and national fills in the federal ballots and the statewide ballots. We do lots of other programming. We are currently in a partnership with WRUU Radio. If any of you listen to that, it's a 6-part series on the Constitution. There's a lot going on right now because of the 100th anniversary. This week is Equality Week. Yesterday was National Women's Equality Day. And so if you hunt around, you can certainly find lots of programming about it. So getting specifically to the topic today, sometimes it's just too hard to vote for all sorts of reasons. You can't get time off work. You don't have a car. As was said earlier, the polling place is not accessible for one reason or another. And so everything the League does is aimed at removing any of those barriers. We advocate for early voting, more locations, and more dates. There are typically no lines and no waiting for early voting, which is really nice. We advocate for absentee voting. It's private, it is secure, despite all claims to the contrary, and we advocate for accessibility, both at the polls and at the voting machine. We are the League of Women Voters of Coastal Georgia, but we are concentrating our efforts for Get Out the Vote in Chatham County. this time. Chatham is the largest county outside of Metro Atlanta. We have over 210,000 registered voters in Chatham County. However, we only have one polling place for every 2,600 residents, and we only have one absentee ballot drop box for all of those voters. So no one saw the pandemic coming, of course, which created this enormous surge in absentee balloting, and no one was prepared for it. Certainly not Chatham County. One absentee ballot drop box and not nearly as many people as they needed to count those ballots. So our efforts are going to be multi-pronged. We are going to target the 4 lowest turnout precincts. We're going to hang these on every door in those precincts. So do you want to vote absentee? Do you want to early vote? Do you know how to vote on election day? And it will have the details on the back of how to do that. This is a contact-free activity. You're not knocking on doors. You're just hanging these on the doorknob. And we are looking for volunteers if anyone would like to volunteer or know someone who would. We're also writing postcards, handwritten postcards, to all of those same people in 2 different ways closer to the election. This, again, is something we're looking for volunteers to do. We give you a packet of 25 postcards with address labels and postage, and you can write them and stick them in the mail to make sure that everyone has the information they need in order to vote. Sean mentioned earlier about the Americans with Disabilities Act. It applies to all aspects of voting. So everything from voter registration, which I mentioned before, to site selection, to casting the ballot on election day, at the polls and at the machine itself. The Voting Accessibility for the Elderly and Handicapped Act, which was passed in 1984, requires that full accessibility. If no accessible location is available, voters must be provided an alternate means of voting on election day. And that brings me back to absentee ballots. So one of the things we are doing this year, which is tremendously exciting to me, is the League is raising money. We are raising $32,000, and we are going to buy 8 additional drop boxes for Chatham County. They will be placed throughout the county. They become county property, of course, per state law. They will be part of every election going forward. Our goal is to have them within easy access of the neighborhoods that need them most. There is no, you don't need a reason to request an absentee ballot in Georgia. And so if you have experienced any problems with accessibility at the polls, this is a very easy way to cast your ballot, and we hope that these drop boxes will make it even easier and more accessible. So what happens at the polls? You didn't early vote and you didn't vote absentee, and now you're going to the polls. After the 2002 election, actually the election in 2001, which resulted in the inauguration of George Bush in 2002, the Help America Vote Act passed. This mandated that there needed, among other things, that there needed to be at least one accessible voting system for people with disabilities at every polling place in a federal election. That the bodies, the Board of Elections that organizes elections, must provide the same opportunity for access and participation. That must include privacy and independence that all other voters receive. That means excuse me, trying to turn the page, that you can get help at the polls if you need it. So for instance, voters who are blind or have another disability can receive assistance from a person of their choice at the polls. It cannot be your employer, it cannot be an agent of your employer, and it cannot be an officer or agent of your union if you are a union member. But you can get someone to help you with the machine if there is any problem. One important thing to know, and a lot of people really don't, but we should commit this to memory. If you have a problem of any sort at the polls, you can call 1-866-OUR-VOTE, which is 866-687-8683. That is the election protection hotline, and they will help you while you're there. You're standing there and you can't get in, you can't cast your ballot, call this number. Sean mentioned earlier about absentee ballots and some of them being thrown out. A problem with absentee ballots is that people tend to sort of mutilate them. They tear off the wrong part, they kind of crumple them up and then fold them wrong and so forth, and they won't fit in the machine. The way the people who count absentee ballots get around that is they can fill out a ballot that is identical to yours with exactly the same choices, put the two together, and with the permission of a supervisor, cast that ballot on your behalf. It's not ideal, obviously. We should all try to use the absentee ballot the way it's designed, but it does go a long way to making sure that your absentee ballot does get counted if anything goes wrong.
I have a question, if I may. One of the questions that I foresee that might come up is the term that gets thrown around a lot at the moment, and I'm not being partisan, but we hear the term mail-in voting. I was just wondering, how would you explain the difference between an absentee ballot and a mail-in voting?
There are 6 states that have mail-in voting. There are no polling places. You only vote by mail. Washington, Oregon, I forget exactly the full list, but there are 6 states where you only vote by mail, not in person. That is the process that is under attack, criticism by the powers that be, based on absolutely no proof that there is any fraud or ever has been. The instances of voter fraud in absentee ballot or mail-in ballot are very rare, and prosecutions are very few, and none of them have happened in Georgia, I might add. So the difference between that and absentee ballots is that absentee balloting happens in states that also have polling places.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious because I thought that might be a question that came up.
That's a very good question because we get that a lot too. The president, the first lady, 6 members of the cabinet all voted absentee. In other words, voted by mail. And so no one seems to have any problem with that. The states that have nothing but mail-in voting are the ones that are being attacked, if you will, or questioned to make sure that their process is completely private and unhackable. A lot of people ask the question too about potentially going to voting digitally on your phone, on your laptop, whatever. I don't think that will ever happen because there is no system out there that anyone can come up with that can't be hacked.
That seems too easily manipulated.
Correct. And so voting by mail, you fill it out, you sign it, your signature matches the signature that is on file with the Secretary of State. That ballot, if you voted absentee, has a barcode on it. you can't vote more than once. It's a very, very secure system. And like I said, I'm hoping the drop boxes will help that even more.
Okay, thank you.
I've got my email up here. I'm essentially finished with my PowerPoint. So are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if the what are most of the things that actually, like you mentioned how people are putting everything in the envelope and how this crinkle or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
it makes it hard to go in through the system. What are the other things that's hampering with people's votes? Because I voted in this previous election on the 11th, and I don't trust the mailing system. So what I did was I took the bus and went to the election place and just put it in the box.
Mm-hmm.
And thing is, you see a camera up there,
Mm-hmm.
and they're saying that if you, like, let's say I live in an apartment complex. I'm getting ready to take my ballot up there, and one of my neighbors say, hey, take mine down there too. If that camera sees me putting two of them in there, is that what they call it, harvesting?
Mm-hmm.
Is that harvesting?
Yeah, that is a problem. I would love to volunteer to say to an apartment complex or an assisted living place or something, you collect all the ballots and we'll take them to the drop box, but that is
okay.
No,
So
that's
like,
illegal. That is illegal. You cannot do that. You can only.
I read that thing.
Right.
I read that thing on the box, and you can't do it.
Right, exactly. The Dropbox is the most secure way to do it. Obviously, the post office is supposed to deliver all of them and has said it will deliver all of them.
I don't believe it.
One thing to think about too is a lot of people say that having to put a stamp on your absentee ballot constitutes a poll tax. Voting's free. It shouldn't cost you 47 cents. And so putting it in the Dropbox is the most secure way to do it. But as I said earlier, if you go to that My Voter page, the Secretary of State, it will show you, yes, it was received. Yes, we got it.
Tell me, what is that again?
It's MVP, M as in Mary, V as in Victor, P as in Paul, .sos, .ga, .gov. So it's My Voter page, and you can check your registration. You can check whether they got your absentee ballot.
Wow.
You can find your polling place. It's a one-stop information source. It really is very valuable. But again, she's got it up on the screen.
So like for the 11th, the vote, the election that was on the 11th, I can go to this and see that really?
Yeah.
And you said it's My Vote page?
MVP. She's got it on the screen right now. MVP.sos.ga.gov. And you see the list here of all of the things that you can access from there. It's a very good website. It's not the prettiest website I ever saw, but it does have a lot of information on it.
One thing that when I went to go put my ballot in, there was a gentleman, he's up in age, and he came out of his car and he saw me, and he said, did you vote? And I said, I put my absentee ballot in. And see, he thought it was still early voting. And I told him, hey, it was Friday, and I said, have you filled out an absentee ballot? And he didn't know what that was. And then he was like, well, I go ahead and go to the polling place. And then he was like, I was like begging him, look, let me get you an absentee ballot. And I went on in there, and he was being stubborn. And the ladies at the desk who do the voting thing, they said, let her go get you. So I went and got the application for the absentee ballot form and everything. And it pains me because most of the time it's African American people and elderly who want to get out and vote, but people keep saying, you know, absentee ballots. A lot of them are like, do I have to go somewhere? Do I have to go downtown? You know, it's like what am I gonna have to do? And
right. And that's part of, you know, you hesitate to call it voter suppression, but the state of Georgia is one of only a few states that uses all 6 techniques to dampen the vote. So exact match, voter ID laws, closing polling stations, cutting the hours on early voting. There are lots of ways that they just make it hard. And
even with me,
this really adversely affects neighborhoods that are majority minority.
Because I don't know. Do you think like with the, because I want to volunteer. I can't go to the doors or put, you know, but like, for example, I used to be in the shelters and stuff. Can I take like a stack over there to the shelters?
You can take absentee ballot applications,
Okay.
absolutely. And they can fill them out, and then they will get the ballot. The thing is, they will either have to mail it themselves or they will have to get it in a drop box.
Okay. Because even with me getting a postage stamp, you might as well tell me to put $100 in there, because one, I didn't get I get food stamps, so I don't get any cash. And I was ready to I said, oh man, I gotta have a stamp.
Right.
And I used the bus. So if I had the money to go get a stamp with the bus, it would have taken me 3 hours.
Right.
It would take me 3.5 hours to go there and get home.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that we're buying these extra drop boxes.
That's
I mean, for instance, right now, if you, I'm sorry. I meant to turn my phone off, I'm sorry. If you live in Pooler, there's only one drop box in Chatham County, and it's on Eisenhower. That's 25 miles away. So you're not going to drive over there. Obviously you're not, unless you have another reason to go there for some reason. But for us to be able to put drop boxes in convenient locations around the county, throughout the county, so that people can easily access them and do not need a stamp.
Well, thank you for telling me about the suppression, because I mean, I'm like, you know, it's like, what do you do? And it does feel like you're thinking this or that, and then it's like, wait a minute, you know, because I'm from Missouri. I was born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri, and lived in different places and stuff, and I've never experienced things like this.
Right. Yeah, it can be bad. It really can. Anybody else with a question?
I have a question. Whenever you say exact match, are you referring to signatures? In other words, your signature on your ballot has to match? And if so, you know, how are they comparing it? How are they eliminating ballots that way?
Sometimes yes, I am talking about signatures. Sometimes just the name. So for instance, if my state ID, my driver's license or my state ID, has my middle initial in it, but what they have on record for the Secretary of State when I registered to vote does not have my middle initial, they can refuse to let me vote because it doesn't match exactly. Again, this tends to adversely affect people of color who may have accent marks, tildes, apostrophes, whatever in their name that might have part of it capitalized and part of it not. If it doesn't match exactly, they can turn you down at the polls. this is the point at which you can call that hotline I mentioned before. They should allow you to fill out a provisional ballot, again, while you're there, to fill out a provisional ballot, and then that will go into the system and they'll try to rectify it. But exact match can be a huge problem for all kinds of reasons. This gets to absentee ballots on the signature. If the signature on your absentee ballot does not match the signature on your voter registration, they could throw that out as well. So the exact match is a big problem in states like Georgia. But most of the states that have that as a law are in the South.
But is there someone that goes through each ballot and compares signatures?
Well, when you go to the polls, you hand the person, the poll worker, your state ID, and they look you up. And if the two things don't match, they won't let you go on through the process and cast your ballot. In the last election, Stacey Abrams was a candidate, and they tried to turn her down at the polls based on exact match. And she just stood her ground and, called the hotline or whatever she did and managed to get to vote. But it was based on that exact match rule.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Wow is right.
Rebecca, do they have any data on how like any sort of demographics data on who they're choosing to review the ballots for? You
mean the counters themselves?
Yes. So basically my question is, I'm guessing that you could show discriminatory intent if you could keep track of who they were actually pulling ballots for, because I'm guessing they're flagging them based on identifying features of people who are submitting ballots. But I just was wondering if they track that.
They probably do. I have never seen data on it. The people who work, I volunteered or signed up to count absentee ballots in November because we're anticipating a huge flood of absentee ballots then. And of course, no one was prepared for the flood that came in the primary. Who are those people and why were they flagged? Is it because the ballot was torn up and just, you couldn't read it, or it wouldn't fit in the machine or whatever? Or was it something like exact match? What were the reasons for it? And I'm sure they are keeping data on it. I just haven't seen any.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
If I want to volunteer, just email you.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Absolutely. Love
I'll
to
give you
have
something to do.
One of the things that's been really nice about our Get Out the Vote, both the fundraising and the asking for volunteers to help with postcards and things like that, is people really, really want to do something.
Yeah.
And they just need a little guidance as to what that would be. And they want to do something tangible, not just, I write you a check and it goes into some bank account someplace. I want to know, I wrote this card and, I put up this sign. I did something tangible that I know is going to make a difference. So it's been really, really heartening to see people want to get involved that way.
Yeah.
Angel, is there anything I missed? You had a PowerPoint deck too that we didn't go through, but.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm just scrolling through with some of the options for looking things up online for people that are able to see these this way. And then we can also, because we're recording, we can present this later for people that weren't able to join us today. And then we can always provide additional information based on questions from that, and or refer some of these questions to you later if you'll let us, because you are a font of valuable information. You're a tremendous resource. But I'm just going through the tiles for our PowerPoint that is specific to this. And I do have the vote 411.org up for everybody. That is something that she mentioned earlier, it's brought to you by the League of Women Voters Education Fund. Mm-hmm. And I took a look at it and it's wonderful. It's something that I wish I had known about in other elections.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. It's a beast to put together, I'll tell you.
I bet. I was thinking that too. I don't know how on earth you manage to compile all of that and keep it accurate and up to date. That must take a lot of time and diligence.
It takes a lot of time. The thing that's fascinating about it, though, even with how much work it is you learn so much. Mm-hmm. I mean, what does the coroner do? What does the public utilities guy do? You know, what are these jobs that we're voting for? And then some of the candidates themselves who are so ill-informed. Mm-hmm. You know, my number one issue is human trafficking. I'm making that up. And you think, you know, your job doesn't have any authority over that. So it's a real education for us, certainly at the League, when we put it together. And I hope it turns into a good resource for voters as well.
Yeah,
was that a local effort that you put together, or is that a national?
It's both. We have to put together, each League chapter puts together their local races. So we did, you know, district attorney, county commission, coroner, judges, that sort of thing. And our local U.S. representative, the Buddy Carter, Joyce Griggs race. And then the state puts together the congressional races. And then the national, of course, puts together the president, vice president, and those races. So, yeah, it's as far as the League is able, and the resources, the local resources, put in the time and effort. Our goal is every candidate should be running. It should be there. And voters any place in the United States should be able to see who is going to be on their ballot.
Awesome. That is an extremely helpful resource.
Thank you.
I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, you know how they talk about the different voting things or different programs, you know, like some of the things like food drives or, you know, just kind of general information type thing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes on the news, it will say something that's going to go on either the day before, which a lot of people aren't watching the morning news, or the day of. And I was, you know, some of the information you have is really good, especially on making sure that you're, you know, hyphen your names, you know, all those different kind of things, and how to place it in the envelopes and stuff. I was just wondering if you all could help with something like that.
We try. I mean, we have a part of our website, which is lwvcga.org, that is a voter toolkit. So it literally says, you walk into the polls and then what happens? Okay. You want to register, you know, what are they going to ask you for when you get there? What sort of documents do you need to take with you? Whatever it might be. So we try to answer all those questions, anticipate all those questions before people get there. We had, it was interesting, this was one of our voter registration things with high school seniors. And this young man was so excited to vote for the first time. And so he went, and when they asked him which party, he said independent, because he thought that meant he'd get to see everybody. Well, what it really meant was he got to see one race, because there was only one independent running. And he was so disappointed. So to be able to say to young people, for instance, who've never voted before, what does it mean when they ask you what party you want a ballot for, and what is that then going to look like?
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, are there any other questions?
No, but I feel like I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I
Thank
have.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think every time I listen to you, Rebecca, I learn something new.
Yes.
Or
Very
several,
flattering. Thank you.
several things, actually. Yeah.
Yes.
One thing I do have, and I can share this with Angel, we have a one sheet of information with early voting locations, times and dates, absentee ballot, you know, it's all in one sheet. I'm happy. We just updated it because Pooler finally came out with an early voting location. So I can send you that final one if you want to share it with people. I'm happy
Yeah.
to send that
That
out.
would be fantastic. If you wouldn't mind sending that to us, we can absolutely share that.
Sure.
That's invaluable.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to thank Rebecca on behalf of Life for excellent presentation, very informative. And so we thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, like I said, send me an email if you think of anything later.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we absolutely will. Thank you, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
And we'll be able to, we have recorded this, so we'll be posting it for folks to glean some of this really valuable information also from our Facebook page as well.
Good. Excellent. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.